everything. But let's talk about Israel, Connor, where the Israeli people are being or not the Israeli people, the Palestinians are being terrorized by the Israeli government and the IDF. We have just some horrific stories to get into: a 15-year-old Palestinian boy killed in the West Bank, and then these clashes during protest in Gaza. But let's go ahead and start with what's happening in the West Bank, Connor, and some of the Israeli killings there.
Yeah, so we'll start with the 15-year-old boy who was killed. This is a report out of Al Jazeera from this week. Ahmad Khalid Salah Hashash, a 15-year-old, was killed in a refugee camp, the Balata refugee camp in the in the West Bank near Nablus, and which is sort of in the northern part of the West Bank. And yeah, it was an overnight operation. They're apprehending a suspect. These night raids that just go, they seem to be ramping up, but they're a constant occurrence. The boy was, they come in the middle of the night with their forces, and this boy was standing on top of the roof of one of the houses, and the Israeli forces claimed that a riot was started. And that people were throwing things like cement blocks and different objects from the roof. And their story is that they turned around and fired at a guy who was holding something up on the roof. And it turned out to be this 15-year-old boy who they shot in the head. And it's just been brutal because we're seeing more and more of these raids. There was another instance where four Palestinians in their late teens and early 20s were murdered in the Jenin refugee camp in the northern part of the West Bank, and this was last week, where you had undercover units going in there in the very early morning, pre-dawn, and they shot 8 Palestinians. Again, it's always under the idea that they're going in there. Well, these are like night raids, so they go in and they arrest somebody. And of course, there's a very it's a Orwellian legal system that the conviction rate is it's over 90%. And they go in and they shot these they shot 8 people, and 2 of them were Raid Abu Saif, who's 21, Salah Ammar, who's 20. He was evacuated to the Jenin Governmental Hospital. And then there were 2 other young men, Noor Eldin Abdullah Jarar, is 19, and Amjad Ayad Amzi Husseini, who is also 19. And their bodies, the Israelis do this quite often. Their bodies were, they prevented medical. They prevented ambulances from reaching these guys, and then they took their bodies and they've detained them, and they're not returning them. And that's another thing that happens often. And they also arrested another guy in the camp during the raid. So apparently in this case, we had eyewitness reports that were taken from Middle East Eye that said that the snipers were on the roof in this case, Israeli snipers, and that they were shooting at people from the roofs. And one of these young men actually had a gun and fired back. So they shot him. He fell to the ground, and then they essentially, it says, heavily fired into him until he was dead. And one of his friends, allegedly Husseini, attempted to grab him and pull him away, and they shot and murdered that young man as well. There's some shocking statistics that are included in this article. So according to the UN Office of Coordination for Humanitarian Affairs, there have been more than 2,500 these arrest raids in the West Bank since the beginning of the year. And just from July 27th to August 9th, Israeli forces have carried out 92 raids across the West Bank, arresting 115 Palestinians, including 11 children. And they've reported they've injured 764 Palestinians in the West Bank just in that time period, 4 of whom were killed. Last month they murdered an 11-year-old boy getting groceries with his family, a young boy with his father in their, I think it was a van they were in. And then when the funeral was held, they came back and murdered somebody else at the funeral. It's it's incredible. It's another thing. 55 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank so far this year, and more than 12,000 have been injured. So, and that's not even including what's going on in Gaza. So we're seeing a ramping up of violence under the Bennett government, and we're seeing, Bennett's going to speak, or he was supposed to speak with He's supposed to speak with Biden today, but last I read, that meeting got canceled. But he's indicated that he is not seeking any peace talks with the Palestinians and will continue to expand the illegal settlements. They just announced thousands more houses that will be built in Area C. And it's just, yeah, I mean, it's just devastating. And the Biden administration has expressed that they don't want to see any more of the settlements, although I feel like every Democratic administration tries to do that to some extent. Trump was a unique situation, essentially giving Israel everything they wanted. But in a lot of these cases, we see these different policies have not been rolled back. Recognizing the capital as Jerusalem, the American embassy being in Jerusalem as well, being moved to Jerusalem as well. In fact, we've seen there was a piece I read at Electronic Intifada the other day about how the State Department has essentially taken the line that the Golan Heights is Israel. So, yeah, I mean, it's very interesting to see how there's so much continuity of the policy.
Yeah, well, not just of the continuity, but escalation, and Biden is endorsing all the escalation. That's the really crazy thing here. It's not like he's like it's continuing just from Obama to Trump to Biden. It's escalating from Obama to Trump to Biden.